How are you guys doing? Today is Friday, May 27th, 2022. I'm James Sims, and for this episode of The Elite, I'm going to do an elite individual profile on João Cancelo, the elite Portuguese fullback for Manchester City, turns 28, and my intention with this episode is, of course, to do an in-depth look at what his career has looked like from the moment that he stepped foot on the main stage to where he is right now. He is currently regarded as one of the world's best players, as he is playing for Manchester City, a team that has won 4 of the last 5 Premier League titles, not to mention that he's playing for a team that's regularly competing for being one of the best teams in Europe every single season. Not to mention that he's on a Portuguese national team that, of course, can do a lot of damage at this upcoming World Cup, not to mention European continental titles. So with this being my first profile of João Cancelo, I'm going to just get into a little bit of background. So he's originally from Beirero, Portugal. And then he would eventually find himself in the Benfica youth system, as the Benfica youth system was, of course, one of the premier programs in Portugal. He would eventually get called up to Benfica to play only a game in 2013-14 in his age 19 season, as he would only play about 64 minutes in a season in which Benfica would go on to win the Primeira Liga, not to mention they would go on to win the Portuguese Cup, or the Portuguese Cup and the Portuguese Super Cup. They also went on to finish as runners-up in Europa League. That's actually how good Benfica was that season. Once they got to the very end, the team that eventually would knock them out would be Sevilla in the final. But of course, I think following that season, where he would, of course, just get a little bit of the playing time there, he then would go on to be moved to Valencia in Spain, as he would go to join on a 1-year loan deal at first, and then he would go on to join the team. But looking first at his loan year in his age 20 season in 2014-15, he would start 5 of the 10 matchups he played in a season in which Valencia would go on to finish 4th in the table. That was actually the highest finish that they had since 2012. They actually haven't finished higher than 4th since 2012, but that was one of the seasons in which they would finish that high. Within that season, within that year, João would go on to make sure that the team conceded 3 goals in the 10 matches he played. But he would go on to finish with 3 full clean sheets on the La Liga year, as he was starting to get a little bit more experience under him. After that very first year at Valencia, they decided they would go on to sign him, as in that year, he would go on to return. In his second year at Valencia, in his age 21 season in 2015-16, he would start 25 of the 28 matchups he played for a Valencia squad that would go on to finish 12th in La Liga. However, he would go on to play for a team that would play in group stage and get of Champions League, then get knocked down to Europa League. In 2015-16, they would eventually get knocked out of the Europa League, as eventually the team that would knock Valencia out would be Athletic Bilbao. They would get knocked out by the eventual champs Sevilla in the quarterfinals, just to give you a little bit of context on that season. But within that season, he would go on to finish with a goal and 4 assists, as he was playing that fullback role. And then additionally, looking at how he was faring on the defensive end, the team would concede about 29 goals in the 28 matches he played, as he was a part of 6 clean sheets. He did go on to start in his very first Champions League matchups that season, not to mention that also in Copa del Rey, they would go on to finish in the semifinals. But following that year, João Cancelo would return for his age 22 season in 2016-2017. Also in that year, he would go on to get called up to the senior Portuguese team, as he has kind of been an on and off player on that team time and again, but he would make his debut in that season. But going back to Valencia in his third season there in 2016-17, he would start 27 of the 35 matchups he played in a season in which Valencia would finish 12th in La Liga for the second year in a row. They would finish in the round of 16 of the Copa del Rey, but in Joao Cancelo's last full season there, he would finish with a goal and 4 assists, as well as he started, like I said, 27 of the 35 games. But within that season, the team would concede about 45 goals in the 35 matchups he played, as they had 6 clean sheets. Following his 2 seasons with Valencia, he would go on to join Inter Milan on a loan deal. And I think once he joined Inter Milan, I think a lot of that started to change. In his age 23 season, in his loan season with Inter Milan, he started 20 of the 26 matchups he played in a season in which Inter Milan would go on to finish with the 4th best record in the Serie A. That had been their best finish since 2011, as they had gone through a good amount of turmoil, at least to get up until that point. But in Joao Cancelo's loan season that year, he would make sure that in the 26 matchups he played, he would go on to score a goal, add a couple of assists. And then on the defensive side, he would go on to help the team concede 14 goals in the 26 matches he played, as he was a part of a team that had 10 clean sheets, probably one of the better defenses that he had. Not to mention that he also played a couple of Coppa Italia matchups in a season where they would go on to lose in the quarterfinal, as the team that would eventually knock them out of the quarterfinal would eventually be AC Milan, their crosstown rivals. But following his loan season at Inter Milan, he would go on to be signed to a 5-year deal by Juventus, as of course he was recognized as being one of the better defenders in Serie A. And he would go on to play at Juventus for just 1 season of that 5-year contract. His first season at Juventus would be his age 24 season in 2018-19, as he would start 22 of the 25 matchups in a season in which Juventus would go on to be the champions of Italy. This year would go on to be the 8th year in a row that they had won it, and I believe this was their 35th Serie A title, as within that Serie A season, he would go on to score a goal and add 3 assists himself on the offensive side. On the defensive side, he was a part of a Juve side that conceded 13 goals in those 25 matches. He was a part of a side that had 10 clean sheets, his second straight season with 10 Serie A clean sheets. He was also a part of a Juventus team that would go on to finish as quarterfinalists in the Coppa Italia that year. That year, they would end up losing to Atalanta, who made it to the finals, and ended up losing to Lazio. Additionally, they would end up making it to the Supercoppa Italia, where they would beat Milan, as Cristiano Ronaldo would score the game-winning goal to give them that cup title in the Champions League. Juventus would end up going all the way to the quarterfinal, as the team that would eventually knock them out would be Ajax. Ajax would end up losing to Tottenham in the semi, as Tottenham would end up losing to Liverpool in the final. So that is how that would end up going. But of course, following that 1 season with Juventus, he would end up getting signed by Manchester City in a 6-year deal. And he would then go on to play the last 3 seasons so far for Manchester City, the team that he's currently playing for right now. His very first season with Manchester City with Pep Guardiola was in 2019-2020 during the quarantine season, a season where the end ended up getting delayed by a lot. He ended up starting 13 of the 17 matchups he played in a season in which Manchester City would go on to finish as runners-up after winning the Premier League the 2 years prior. In his very first Premier League season, he would go on to, in the 13 matches he would go on to start, the team would concede 7 goals in the 17 matches he played, as he would be a part of 8 full clean sheets. Although they finished as runners-up in the Prem, they would finish in the semifinals in the FA Cup, But looking at how else they fared in the other cups in England, they would go on to win the English Football League Cup final as they beat Aston Villa 2-1, as Aguero and Rodri would be the two goal scorers in that matchup. They would go on to be the Community Shield Cup winner as they beat Liverpool 1-1. They would win off of penalties. And then they would end up going all the way to the quarterfinal of Champions League as the team that would eventually knock Manchester City out of the pack would be Lyon. Lyon would end up losing to the eventual champs Bayern in the semifinals. But that is, of course, how 2019-2020 ended in his very first season playing with the team. He will come back, and in his second season with Man City, in his age 26 season in 2020-21, he will go on to start 27 of the 28 matchups he played in a season in which Manchester City went on to win the Premier League, as he was one of the best players in the Prem. He will go on to add 2 goals and 3 assists. I guess that's how we fared on the offensive side. On the defensive side, the team would concede 15 goals in the 28 matches he played, as he would be a part of 15 clean sheets. Not to mention, outside of that, Man City would go on to win the Prem for the third time in 4 seasons, but this would be the first time that Joao Cancelo would win the Premier League. This would be the second time he won This would be the third time he won a domestic cup. This would be the third country in which he did it, as he did it in Portugal as well. He would also go on to help them win the EFL Cup final for the second year in a row as they beat Tottenham. The lone goal came from Aymeric Laporte. And then following that 2020-2021 season, they would also taking a look at how they fared in the Champions League. They would end up losing in the final to Chelsea, as they would make it incredibly far. But of course, this would transition into this most recent season where Joao Cancelo will go on to play all 36 games for Man City this year. This would be the first season in which he did so. And he would go on to add a goal and 7 assists for a Man City team that would go on to just win the Premier League season yet again. This is the 4th time they've won in the last 5 years. This is the 2nd time they've won it in the 3 seasons they've had Joao Cancelo. The Premier League title so far I guess this year was the only title that Man City was able to win, as they finished in the semi-cup. They finished in the semifinals in the FA Cup. They would finish in the 4th round of the English Football League Cup final. But they would end up as the runners-up, losing in the Community Shield to Leicester City, as Iheanacho's penalty would be what put them through. They would end up losing in the semifinals this year to Real Madrid, as Real Madrid is going to be facing off against Liverpool in the final instead of Man City, as Man City ended up blowing a very serious lead late in the game. But of course, that's how it would end. But of course, this leads us to where we are with Joao Cancelo, as he is getting ready to enter what could be a very impressive Premier League season. Not to mention that the World Cup is set to start at the end of this year in November, December. I can't wait to see what happens between now and next year. But I do think that as of right now, Joao Cancelo at 28 is one of the best players in the world. And I think that he's a player that you just have to watch and see how he really contributes to this team effort offensively and defensively, and you see how big of a cog he is in the ship, then I think you get to appreciate how good he is. Because not just anyone is expected to regularly play for Man City at this level, playing for one of the best players, or for playing for one of the best coaches, playing alongside some of the best players, especially playing such a versatile position such as fullback. So with that, I commend Joao Cancelo, and I want to wish him a happy 28th birthday. So until then, I would encourage you to watch him. He's wearing number 27 for Man City. I do want to thank the Pro Football Reference websites, the Transfer Mark websites, Footy Stats, and even the Wikipedia sites on the team's individual seasons. I do want to thank all that data for, of course, I want to thank all those sites for giving me all the data, because I couldn't do it myself. And with that said, I want to keep going with everything that's going on today. Once everything's done today, I'll catch you up with more tomorrow on Saturday, May 28th. So until then, thanks for listening. I hope all is well, and I'll catch you with more tomorrow. Thanks for listening to this piece. I hope all is well, and peace out.